So I want to talk to you now about opening statement. And I previously said that I believe you win your trial in voir dire and opening statement. And what that does for me is it turns my opening statements into a longer and longer process. But the reason why I make them so long is because I am locking down every detail that I think either the defense will try to change or that it might confuse the jury. And so, you know how they say you want to keep it into storytelling, and I 100% believe that, because when I stand up to do an opening statement, I really, in the back of my mind, are saying, once upon a time. And I literally am doing it, because once upon a time, there was this magic convention that I told you about right before we went to break. But once upon a time, there's a company called MedicWest. Now I'm not saying it out loud, I'm saying there's a company called MedicWest. And MedicWest is a pre-hospital provider in the Valley. And MedicWest, in order to be a pre-hospital provider, and in order to get their contracts, in order to be a licensed pre-hospital provider, where they can get their contracts with the casinos, where they can transport patients, where they can stay in business, they have to get permission from what's called the Southern Nevada Health District. And the Southern Nevada Health District controls pre-hospital providers in the Valley. And you'll learn that the Southern Nevada Health District has task forces. And those task forces do something that's called promulgate. What does that mean? That means they write the protocol that the pre-hospital providers have to follow in the Valley. And you'll learn that there is a medical board down at the Southern Nevada Health District. And the medical board approves the protocol that's written by these task forces. Now, these task forces keep an eye on what's going on in the community. They look and see what's going on with patient care. What can we do to make it consistent? And what can we do to improve it? Now, MedicWest cannot function without licensure and approval from the Southern Nevada Health District. But MedicWest isn't just waiting for approval from the Southern Nevada Health District. You will learn that MedicWest sits on these task forces. You will learn that they actually are involved in the writing of the protocol that they have to follow. And you'll learn that they have a seat on the medical board. So not only do they write the protocol, they approve the protocol. You're going to hear from John Hammond, and he is in charge of the Southern Nevada Health District's emergency medical services and trauma systems. And you're actually going to learn that he previously even worked for MedicWest. And you're going to learn a lot about the protocol that was in effect in February of 2013 regarding allergy and anaphylaxis. And this protocol is a step-by-step protocol that every pre-hospital provider has to follow. No questions asked. It is step-by-step. There's general patient care, assess for an allergy. You're going to learn, as I told you earlier, they didn't have to assess for an allergy in this case. Why? Because Chantel Giacalone told them, I'm having an allergic reaction. I bit into the pretzel. It has peanut butter in it. I took my EpiPen. I'm not feeling any relief. Assess for an allergy. The assessment is done. Administer an inhaler if the patient has one. Chantel did not have one and did not need one in this situation. Administer the patient's own EpiPen. Well, Chantel had already administered her own EpiPen. If the airway is not manageable, attempt an airway device, basically trying to stick something down their throat. Start an IV. Administer fluids. Why? Because someone who is going into an allergic reaction, their system is shutting down. And so you need to get that IV in there, and you need to get saline into the body. Administer Benadryl. Administer albuterol, which comes through the mask. And step 10, for a severe allergic reaction involving stridor or shock, and we will learn what shock is, administer epinephrine in 0.5 milligrams in 1 in 1,000 parts. Now, what does that mean? That means administer epinephrine into the muscle using a concentration of 1 in 1,000 parts, into the muscle, even the leg or the arm. That's if the patient is in shock. We're going to learn what shock is. But if the patient's condition is so critical that imminent circulatory collapse is likely, administer epinephrine in 1 in 10,000 parts. What is imminent circulatory collapse? It is when the body, the blood flowing through the body starts to stop. The body fully shuts down. And when that occurs, you have to get epinephrine, which is adrenaline, directly into the blood, period. The reason why is because if you put it into the muscle and imminent circulatory collapse is happening, the blood won't go into the muscle belly and pull the medication into the bloodstream. So if it's so critical, you have to get it immediately into the bloodstream. And those are the steps under the protocol that was effective at the time. You're going to learn that if you deviate from the protocol in any way, it puts all patients at risk.
The protocols, they're in effect at the time. They were essentially the official procedure for all pre-hospital providers, correct?
Licensed providers in Clark County, yes.
Would you agree with me that unnecessarily deviating from the protocol can increase the risk to a patient?
Can I say I agree with that?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
Can you turn it up for later? The question was, would you agree with me if you unnecessarily deviate from the protocol, it all puts all patients at risk? And he laughs. And I wonder, do I put that in the opening or not? Well, why not? It's laughable. If you unnecessarily deviate from the protocol, which was a major theme in my case, it puts all patients at risk because every single patient in the valley is entitled to the same care. Now, I played a lot of video depositions in my opening. And in this case, I took over 50 depositions. And I videotaped every single one of them. And I locked it down in opening. They had already seen the people. They already knew their testimony. And it is very hard to backtrack from that. And so using ideas of your theme and developing your theme in your depositions is incredibly important. One, because you want to hear how it comes out of your mouth in real life. And then two, you want to see how people react to it, right? So John Hammond, who actually was a former employee of MedicWest, he's not going to argue with that. He's the head of the Southern Nevada Health District. He's the one who says these protocol needs to be followed. But the message is that it puts all patients at risk. Now, the Southern Nevada Health District puts out a protocol with all of the steps that need to be followed. And at the same time, they put out what's called a mandatory drug inventory. And you're going to learn that the mandatory drug inventory lists every medication that needs to be in the medic's bag when they go out on the field. And these medics, they go to events, they staff everything that they can get a contract for, whether it be casinos, outside events, what's in the jump bags when they're in the ambulance itself. And it's a mandatory drug inventory. And it requires epinephrine in 2 concentrations, 2 vials of the 1 in 1,000 part that goes into the muscle, and 1 of the 1 in 10,000 part that goes into the bloodstream. And you're going to learn that the Southern Nevada Health District wants it in 2 concentrations because the treatment of allergy anaphylaxis is time sensitive. Every minute matters. Time is of the essence because you're cascading, and you're cascading quickly. And if someone's body is stopping circulating, you need to get that adrenaline into that bloodstream as quick as possible. So the medics needed 2 of the 1 in 1,000 into the muscle and 1 of the 1 in 10,000 into the vein. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between medics and paramedics, because you're going to learn that the medics that were at Mandalay Bay and staffing that medic station were called EMTIs, intermediary medics. They weren't basic, they were intermediary, but they are not a paramedic. They are not advanced life support. They live here. And their skills are just above a basic. Their primary management of traumatic wound. They have 200 to 400 hours of training, and they can insert IVs into patients and give certain medications. Well, that's different from a paramedic. Paramedics are advanced life support, and they have life-saving abilities. They have 1,500 or more hours of classroom training and 500 clinical hours. They're required to be 1 year as an EMT. And they have the knowledge and the ability to intubate. And you're going to learn that's important because when you're in an allergic reaction and your throat is closing up, it's not able to get oxygen in. And the ability to intubate, to get that tube in, is vital. And so if you have someone who's in a severe allergic reaction and you don't have the medication that's needed, that phone call to get advanced life support there is vital, because you know you can't treat them with the skills that you have. What is anaphylaxis? It's a lack of oxygen to the organs, your blood pressure drops, your respiratory system inflames, and you go into shock and you lose consciousness. What's the purpose of IV epinephrine? It's adrenaline, right? Increases the heart rate, increases the blood pressure, improves the breathing, and relaxes muscles in the lungs. Now, we're going to be talking a lot about epinephrine in this trial. And we're all kind of familiar, and we talked about it in jury selection about an EpiPen, right? We've heard about that. You have an EpiPen. Well, then that goes into the leg of the arm, just like the intramuscular. It's just a smaller dose. That's what an EpiPen is. Then there's the 1 in 10,000 part that goes into the muscle belly, but you got to have the blood circulating to bring it into the bloodstream. And then there's the IV epinephrine that the Southern Nevada Health District requires for severe allergic reaction. Now, I did all of this in opening in addition to multiple other slides. I think I had 168 slides in opening. Why am I doing this? So basic. Because I don't want my jury confused. I didn't know what IV epinephrine was, and I actually have an allergy to bees. I carry an EpiPen. I didn't know any of these things. But I wanted this basic information. I'm walking them through. And why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Because people don't all learn the same. And so I wanted zero confusion on what we're talking about, because I don't know how many of you hear this from the defense. This is a very complex case. Like, no, it isn't. It's actually not that complicated. I get that all the time, right? And they want it to be complicated. Because a confused jury goes to the defense, and there's no getting around it. And in my jury selection, they stood up and said, there's no such thing as IV epinephrine. And the jury's like, what? They're already trying to confuse them. And so what I'm doing is I am walking it out in baby steps with just the basics that people get, like, okay, blood flow, okay, we get this. And not one of my focus groups was confused, which means good, right? Because that's all you care about. You just want to make sure they're not confused, because they're getting it, they're understanding it. That's all you really care about in your opening for your science areas, right? Because you don't want to be using it, and that's why there's only a few terms you can use. Like, I had to explain promulgate because I couldn't get the witnesses to stop using the term. And I wanted to explain but you can only teach a few terms, right? You're only be teaching like 10 terms max per trial. You cannot be going with all of these big scientific ideas, because then they won't get it. But if you use the right visuals, they do. So we're here today because Chantel Giacalone's life changed forever in that medic room. She was amazing to her family. They looked at her with so much hope. She has an older sister, Cachet. She has a younger brother. You're going to learn that when she came home to visit, they loved it. She's got aunts who help take care of her, and they said whenever Chantel would come in town, she'd do all the girls' makeups, have like a fashion show. She would talk to her dad multiple times a day. She was so close with her family. She was telling them everything that she was doing. She was a force, and she was going places. But because protocol was not followed, this is Chantel today. It's heartbreaking. She lives in her parents' dining room, and they take care of her 24 hours a day. So let's talk about what happened. How did we get here? We got here because MedicWest made a decision. They said, we're not going to follow the protocol. We're going to create our own internal document. It's called an ILS equipment deviation form, where they deviate from the mandatory drug inventory. And we're not going to put IV epinephrine in the medic bags. So you're going to learn that document was used to stock all medic bags for every single EMTI, intermediate life support, in the valley. Going out on ambulances, going to all the events, we're not going to put IV epinephrine in the bag, even though it's on the protocol that we wrote and approved and in the mandatory drug inventory. So why? Why would they do that? Well, the motive in this case is money. Why doesn't MedicWest carry IV epinephrine in the bag? I asked them. And they said, well, the reason for the form not listing the 1 in 10,000 parts was its use history. Use history and that equipment waste is a consideration for any equipment placed in the jump bags. Use history. Medics just weren't using it enough. And see, IV epinephrine expires. And when it expires, you gotta throw it out. Well, how much does it cost to put this IV epinephrine in the bag? $2.42. And let me tell you, defense went nuts. So let's just take a break, because this was pretty hilarious. So I put this up on the screen, and they lost their shit. Objection! They run up. This stays on the screen for, 20 minutes while we're up at the bench arguing. And here was the beauty of it. I never asked one question about it during discovery. It just sat there in an answer to interrogatory. And they had no idea that I was going to say that. None. They thought I was just going to be like, well, they should have it in the bag, and they don't. They have a defense that, well, you can dilute the other stuff and make it into that. They had no idea that I was going to say that the motive is the money, because I never asked one question about it, except for these answers to interrogatories. Now, I would like to say that's brilliant. It's not. The reason is that I asked the question because, I was just asking a bunch of questions, right? And I'm sitting there getting ready for trial, and I'm like, I wonder if I could do the math on how much it costs to put in. And then I saw my answers to interrogatories, and I was like, oh, because I tried to get evidence on their use history, and unfortunately, the Discovery Commissioner had not given me the information, because it's like, well, let me see your research on this use history. Are they really not using it, and that's why you're not putting it in the bag? But, so tomorrow I'm going to do a presentation on developing your theme. And one of the keys to developing your theme is don't let the defense know your real theme. I didn't intentionally do it in this case. But man, did that have impact. And I never asked a word about it, so they didn't know what to say. And what the most amazing part of it was, is they didn't say anything the whole trial about it. I got one witness to admit, yep, that's why we don't use it, because she was scared. But I was able to stand up in closing and say, we know why we're here. $2.42. And that's undisputed in this case. They didn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because they can't. And so the beauty of being able to kind of dig through while you're getting ready for trial and find gems that you've never touched really can make your opening impactful. And they're screaming and the jury's just sitting there staring at $2.42. It is up there on the screen. And so it is amazing your ability to be able to pivot while you're prepping and your ability to be able to pivot while you're in trial, because I actually had to pivot in trial too with more information that you just don't see while you're going through it. But that was the motive in the case, is they just didn't want to put the $2.42 in the bag. That's it. So we talk a lot about timing in this case, and you're going to learn in the treatment of allergy anaphylaxis, timing is critical. And in MedicWest, you're going to learn they have something called a run sheet. What's a run sheet? It's basically where they write down the care that they gave the patient, and they write down the care they gave the patient after they give the care. And in this case, there will be no argument from the defense. The timing is wrong. They can't deny it. They wrote down that she came in at 1,600 hours. We know at that point that she's coded and in transport to a hospital. We have it documented from the dispatch records from Mandalay Bay and from the advanced life support that was called Clark County Fire Department and AMR. They don't know when she came in, and they don't know when they gave her any treatment. This is what they documented for treatment. What does it say? Patient presents ambulatory and without assistance. She was walking and talking when she came in. Patient states she felt itchy and tongue swelling. Patient states took Benadryl orally and gave herself an EpiPen. Well, we know she hadn't taken the Benadryl yet because she sent her friend Tara off to get it. Patient states having trouble breathing. Patient complains of shortness of breath. Patient is in severe distress and unable to speak more than 2 words. Administered albuterol. Patient is now unconscious, unresponsive, and has stopped breathing. She came in walking and talking. She's unconscious, unresponsive, and she stops breathing, and then they start giving her treatment. They do an OPA, she gags. They try to put something down her throat, she gags. Try to put something down her nose. They put a bag valve mask on her. They give her IM epinephrine into the muscle after she has stopped breathing and is unresponsive. There is no blood flow. You will hear from Dr. Eckstein. He said, you might as well have just shot that onto the floor. That epinephrine's not going anywhere. And then they put an IV in. And then they put in saline. And we'll learn to keep open, not flowing into the vein. We don't have Chantel here to tell us what happened. She is unable to speak. She can communicate in some fashion using an eye gaze computer. We know that the MedicWest records are incorrect. They are wrong. We do have her phone records. We know that when she called her dad is Jack, at 3:01, he didn't answer. She called back at 3:01:09, he didn't answer. She called back at 3:01:47. For 32 seconds, they talk. And she tells him, I've bitten into a pretzel. It has peanut butter in it. I'm having an allergic reaction. He tells her, take your EpiPen. Who are you with? Sends Tara to get Benadryl. 3:03:47, Chantel calls her dad back. She had been in the bathroom. She had given herself her EpiPen. He says, get to the medic station. And that's the last time he's spoken to his daughter. 3:06:54, Chantel calls Tara, her friend, who's gone off to get the Benadryl. The call lasts 51 seconds. Chantel tells Tara, I'm not at the booth anymore. Don't bring the Benadryl there. I've gone to the medic station. I'm here. And tells Tara how to get to the medic station. 3:11:22. Tara watches as Chantel turns blue and falls over in the medic station while the medics are asking her, what'd you do last night? Did you guys party? Have you taken anything? Did you drink coffee? Are you sure? Did she go out and party? All while Chantel is grasping for air. And then when she falls over, they kick Tara out of the room. So Tara just calls Chantel back, but Chantel does not answer. So I went through all of the documents during the trial. I had the AMR records, I had the Mandalay Bay dispatch records, I had the Clark County Fire Department records. I am not someone who enters evidence. I find it to be burdensome and useless. Occasionally you do need things if you're creating a timeline. That's where you do need them, but you cannot just put them up. Notice I didn't put up the phone records. What good is that? No one can interpret it. It's in what's called UTC time. You have to make the charts very easy and simple for the jury to understand your timeline, because you're always going to have some sort of competing timeline in a case like this. So I walk through all the documents and tell them why they're so important. Now, were there problems in the timeline? Yes, of course. Like, nobody can get anything right. Like, AMR is on a different clock than CCFD is on a different clock. And you have to kind of work around that and spend your time explaining that you will have to explain this, and you'll have someone talk to you about it. But after moving through the documents, I let them know who they're going to be hearing from. And in this case, I had 33 witnesses in my case in chief. And that's a lot. But you have to be able to manage it. And so this is a way to kind of introduce who the players are, not by just putting up their name and putting it up, but who controls the environment. And so in this case, who's in the medic room? So this is Randy Rothar. He was one of the medics treating Chantel. Amber Manig, I had not videotaped her deposition, but what I did is I went on Facebook, pulled her photos, disclosed them in Discovery so I could use a Facebook photo to put up. And Glenn Simpson, who was supposed to be their supervisor, because you'll learn in this case that that run sheet with all the wrong times on it, and there's a ton of missing information, just sat there for years. Nobody ever told MedicWest what happened to Chantel in that room. Those medics just went back to work and pretended like it didn't happen. They did spitball about it a bit at work, but no one ever documented anything. So kind of giving an idea of like, hey, these are who we're going to see, in a way of presenting it so it doesn't become monotonous and they're not figuring out where to attach the photo to. But let's talk about who is MedicWest in this case. Who are the players that you're going to hear from? And these players, there's something called a corporate representative. And a corporate representative, what does that mean? Sometimes you'll hear this term, 30B6. All it means is that the corporation doesn't actually speak, but what it does is it selects individuals to speak for it, and it educates those individuals on the information that they would like us to know about the corporation on this issue. So they're fully educated individuals who are prepared to testify on behalf of the corporation, so the corporation's position is clear and we get to know it. So here's Jason Drigger, Steve Carter, Christina Curtis, Steve Johnson, Sarah Duarte, and Jennifer Andros. These are the individuals that you will hear from on the issue of the corporation's stance on what they did and what happened in this case.